The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NBA.
The streak lives on for the Cleveland Cavaliers. They won their 12th straight game.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Cleveland Cavaliers didn't have their best stuff again on Monday night, but it didn't matter because once again, this team does what this team does best, and that is find a way to win basketball games. They moved to 12-0 with a 119-113 win over the Chicago Bulls. Donovan Mitchell, I thought, was really, really good in this game. Certainly in the first half, he was a big reason why the Cavs had a good first half tonight. Scored 25 points in the first half. His jump shot was working, hit 7 threes on the night. I think that first half, probably the best half he has played this season. And overall, this was probably the best game that Donovan has played this season as well. That, to me, is one of the biggest reasons why the Cavs were able to win this game, because they didn't play defense all that well for the most part. I will talk about the third quarter with the bench bunch coming up, because that, to me, was an incredibly impressive part of this game for the Cavs. They didn't win this game without that group. They certainly don't win this game without Ty Jerome. But Donovan Mitchell did Donovan Mitchell things, too. He was really good when they needed him to be really good. And I think that this is a team right now that looks kind of tired. They've played 12 games in 20 days to open up the season. That's a really tough stretch of basketball. And it gets to a point where I don't think it matters who the opponent is. Like, it doesn't matter that the Chicago Bulls aren't great. It doesn't matter that Saturday's opponent, the Brooklyn Nets, aren't a great team. Because the Cavs have played so much basketball in such a short period of time, where they have played more games than everybody else in the NBA. No one has played more games so far this season than the Cavs have. So it gets to a certain point when this team just does not have rest, that they're going to look tired, that their legs are going to look a little bit heavy. I don't think there's a better example than that, than Donovan Mitchell missing that dunk that he missed in the fourth quarter. That dunk would have finished the game. Now, the Cavs still won, it didn't matter, but I think Donovan Mitchell with fresh legs probably doesn't miss that. And I do think if the starters were playing heavier minutes than they are, they'd be in much worse shape. Part of the reason why they're able to gut through these games, despite how much basketball they've had to play recently, is because the minutes for the starters are down. Part of that's because of the way Kenny Atkinson coaches. Part of that is because they had a handful of blowout wins earlier in the season. But Donovan Mitchell, to me, was the best player on the floor tonight. The Cavs are at a point, because of how tired they are, and I just explained why, they're going to have nights, and I talked about this on yesterday's show. There are going to be moments when this Cavs team needs Donovan Mitchell to step up, when this Cavs team needs Donovan Mitchell to go out and be a superstar. Those moments so far this season have been few and far between, and that's a really good thing. That's one of the best things about this Cavs team. But they're still going to need their superstar to go be a superstar. And Monday night, they needed their superstar, Donovan Mitchell, to go be a superstar. And that's exactly what Donovan Mitchell did. I thought the way he came out in this game was awesome. It was in the back of my mind that, okay, well, he also had a really good first quarter against Brooklyn on Saturday and then wasn't great the rest of the game. But I thought that he carried it over. The second quarter was really good. And then in the fourth quarter, third quarter, I thought he was a little bit passive, which, we can talk maybe tomorrow about the Cavs' struggles in the third quarter. But then in the fourth quarter, he scored 10 points, and the Cavs needed it. The Cavs needed a boost because the rest of the starting lineup, Darius Garland, I thought his shot looked a little bit off, which is definitely a sign of tired legs, right? So I thought that looked a little bit off. I just didn't think that the starters had it tonight, and they look like a group, like I said, that is a little bit tired. So they needed Donovan to step up. And not only did he score 36 points, he had 8 rebounds. It's a really big deal. I believe he had 4 steals on the night as well. They needed him to do all of those things. They needed him to bring it on both ends of the court. They needed his rebounding. They needed his defense. They needed his scoring. They needed his shooting. They needed his playmaking. They needed everything that Donovan Mitchell was able to give them on Monday night. The Cavs needed it. They needed that was a superstar performance. I don't care that it might not have been his most efficient game I don't care that he settled for maybe a few more threes than you'd like. I think he was 7 of 16 from beyond the arc. I don't care about that stuff. What Donovan Mitchell was on Monday was a superstar. And that's the reason why the Cavs are 12-0 after that game, because Donovan Mitchell showed up and did superstar things. I also thought it was really good to see, after not having a great game, which he's allowed to not have a great game, Darius Garland helped close that game out. And he has shown so far this season, I think the best thing about his season, and we're talking about a guy that just won Player of the Week, announced on Monday afternoon. I think the best thing so far about Darius Garland's season has been the way that he played in the clutch. And I talked about this extensively on yesterday's episode. But again, in clutch time on Monday night, scores the basket that really puts the game away. That was the basket that, okay, this game is over. The Cavs are winning with less than a minute left. A few possessions before that, penetrates into the lane and finds Evan Mobley for an alley-oop. That was a really big play. Darius Garland has stepped up at the end of games, and Monday night was no different. This is who he's been. He's the guy that looks fearless. He's the guy that looks confident. He's the guy that looks capable of, when the team needs him or needs somebody, whether it's him, Donovan, Evan, whoever, when they need somebody to say, all right, get on my back, we're going home, Darius Garland's been capable of doing that. And it wasn't the most impressive finish to a game he's had on Monday night, right? Like, you think of New York, you think of Milwaukee, even Brooklyn, you think of those games, it's like, okay, this is Darius Garland. Monday night wasn't that, but there were glimpses of it. There was enough of it that said, okay, this guy's here and he's doing these types of things again. So when you can combine that with the performance Donovan Mitchell had, that's a way for a good team to win on a night when they very clearly don't have their best stuff. They didn't have their best stuff against Brooklyn. They didn't have their best stuff against Chicago. I don't know if they're going to have their best stuff against Philadelphia on Wednesday, but the fact that they keep finding ways to win these basketball games when they clearly don't have their best performance, that to me is not only really impressive, but it's a sign of a really great team too. Good teams don't win games. And I said this on after Saturday's game. Good teams don't win games like Saturday and like Monday night, truthfully. Great teams win games like Saturday and Monday night. The Cavs have announced themselves as a great team. They're number one in all the power rankings. They are 12-0. They're the 8th team in NBA history to begin a season 12-0. This is a team that is a true championship contender. Whether everyone likes it or not, this is a team that is capable of winning the finals this year. I didn't know that I believed that before the season, but because of and it's not just the record, it's the way they've gotten to the record.
Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKED ON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Now let's talk Thunder bouncing back with a huge win on the second night of a back-to-back. They beat the Clippers 134-128 in a game in which they once had a 20-point lead. The Clippers only led by 4, 6 lead changes, 3 ties in this contest. The Clippers killed the Thunder on the glass 47-29, but Oklahoma City made up for that by producing 23 turnovers to OKC's just 11 turnovers in this contest. And it was really an impressive showing from Oklahoma City. If I told you this morning that on the second night of a back-to-back, the Clippers would come into Oklahoma City and shoot 55% from the floor, 54% from 3, you would have thought that the Thunder lost that game 10 times out of 10. But the Thunder respond with 51% from the floor, 39% from 3, and 95% at the charity stripe, whereas the Clippers only made 69% of their free throws. The Thunder won points in the paint, 54-46. They lost second chance points, only 21-17, though. And then Thunder won fast break points by 6, 16-10. I thought that this was a game, as just an overarching point, where you once again saw it on display, what you saw a year ago. You know, it really hurt the Pelicans in the playoffs. And not to say that the Pelicans would have won that series by any stretch, but they wouldn't have gotten swept had they not tried to fight fire with fire. Like you are not going to play better small ball basketball than the Thunder. Number one, their small ball players are just more talented than you. And number two, their small ball players have done it more than you. They're more experienced than you, and they know how to execute it better than you do. So you cannot fight small ball with small ball. And that's what Willie Green fell in love with in the playoffs. That's what Ty Lue fell in love with whenever the Thunder extended this lead to 20. But once he went back to Zubac, you saw the clean entry passes and you saw him really feast down low. Now look, when you take his box score and just look at it on the surface, it's not pretty at all. Like, he's a -9. He did have 22 and 14, but he was still losing his minutes. He did shoot 75% from the floor with no three-pointers. But when you look specifically at the second half, Zubac was a +5, and that's where he scored 18 of his points. And he was really helping this team turn the tide, where he's a +6 in the third quarter for like the final 7 minutes of that frame, which is where the Clippers narrowed the gap. And it was largely because of Zubac and because the Thunder just had to get worn down by facing off with a big like him. The good news for the Thunder is, even if coaches want to stay in love with the big, you look at the upcoming schedule. New Orleans can only offer you Yves Missi, who's a good player, and he had a double-double today. I think of another double-double Wednesday. He's a good player. But past him, it's Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, who is a small ball center, and you know very well, and Daniel Tice. Like, so it's not as though the Pelicans really have any choice. And then on Friday, you have Nurkic, who is going to have a baller night, but nobody really else. Now, the issue would come on Sunday against Dallas, if they can get healthy, if they can have Derek Lively, they'd be able to go to Gafford and Lively consistently, and that game could be a little messy. That game could be a bit harder to patchwork. But I think teams need to stop trying to meet the Thunder where they're at, because at that point, you're letting the Thunder dictate the terms of the game, and when you do, they're just simply more talented than you. They really are. But overall, I thought the grit in this game was massive. The energy in this game was what kept them really in control. You know, they had the early back and forth lead changes. You know, there were 6 of them total. But once they wrestled away that lead in the middle of the second quarter and they grew it to 20, they never give it back. Now, if they get dicey, it got down to like 3 points at the end. But the Thunder were able to still manage the game very, very, very well. And I think that's in large part because of Mark. Like the trust that you have in Mark to consistently flip through the Rolodex and see what's going to work. For example, some things aren't going to work. Dylan Jones is not working right now. And that's not an indictment on Dylan Jones. Like, we all knew that the jump from mid-major to the NBA was massive. We are playing much better talent at a much quicker pace. But specifically, the jump from you're the offensive engine at Weber State, now you've got 5 minutes to go be impactful. Go do it. That's hard to do. Because like at Weber State, you could use your first 5 minutes of the game to get acclimated, get your legs under you, see how the game's flowing. You've got to be ready to be a positive contributor from the moment you step on the hardwood. And this is something that Cam Woods harped on with developing Ousmane Dieng, of, you know, you're trying to teach them how to be effective in these bursts, in these spurts. And that's why, despite Oos starting for the Blue, which he doesn't start for the Thunder, even whenever he was starting, he would only play about 5-6 minutes at a time, because you're trying to condition him to play and be ready to play and impactful to play in these quick little bursts. And Dylan Jones has to learn that skill. And it's a foreign skill for him on top of a foreign position. Like, I know that he's played off ball at Weber State. I know he's really proud of that. It's different to play off ball at Weber State and to play the 4/the 5 in the NBA. With all due respect to the mid-majors, you know, I covered Division II basketball for a long time. I have a lot of respect for the non-blue bloods, but it's worlds different. So, for example, Dylan Jones was not ready, but it's not as though Mark is stubborn the way other coaches are. Like, he's going to flip through everybody and figure out something. And so you just have this innate trust in him to patchwork lineups and patchwork situations together that gets you to a win. And whenever you have an SGA driving the bus, it makes life a lot easier. Like, Shea was special. He was every bit an MVP in this game. 45 points from him, 9 assists, 3 rebounds, 5 steals, 2 blocks, only 1 turnover, 4 for 8 from 3, and a couple just dagger step backs that really either continued runs or, were back-breaking for the Clippers trying to build momentum. 15 for 16 at the free throw line, where he was able to nail his tech free throws. He had a transition take free throw. And then, of course, he got to the line by getting to the rim. And 61.9% from the floor. For a guy to take 21 shots and to make 61% of them, it's just special. And in this game, I thought he found the best balance so far of when to hit the right buttons. Like, of looking at this as a control room. Like, when do you take the three? When do you cue the pass and take the pass? When do you do these things on the floor? When do you take over and drive? And he's had moments, he's had flashes of putting it all together, but this was the game that was an all-around just special game, setting his teammates up very well without being deferential, incorporating his three-point shot without abandoning the mid-range and at the rim. And I know that, his crutch and his mindset is the right mindset of just taking what the defense gives you. But sometimes you can dictate what the defense is going to do. And I think he did a good job of doing that tonight. Was a +8 in 39 minutes and scored 45 points. And it was the recipe. Like, this was the recipe. What we talked about on yesterday's show, what it would take for this team to win without Chet and without any centers, was a more aggressive and decisive Shea, a more aggressive and decisive J-Dub, and then defensively, you have got to play on a string and just swarm the basketball in the paint. And this was how you do it. Because along with Shea's 45-point night was J-Dub's 28 points and 8 rebounds and 6 assists and 2 steals and 2 for 3 from 3 and 68% from the floor. Like, J-Dub was phenomenal in this game. And he, too, played the best he's played at deciding when to be aggressive. Versus throughout this year, the theme has kind of been he's a little too passive this year. But he was superb in this game. But while those two guys stole the box scores, rightfully so, they're going to steal the headlines. This was an all-around team win. And the recipe was simple. Let those two guys drive the bus. Defensively, you just fluster James Harden in the pick and roll. And when he tries to use the pick and roll and hit the roller and Zubac, everybody goes to him, and you live with whatever outlier shooting numbers that the rest of the crew can scrap together. And to the Clippers' credit, they tried their best. I mean, he had a 4 for 5 night from Derrick Jones Jr. You sign on the dotted line every single time. You had a 5 for 8 a night from Norman Powell, who's playing out of his mind right now. Like, you got some quality shooting nights. Amir Coffey 3 for 5. I mean, you shot 54% from 3. Like, the game plan was right. The results were almost like against you. Because again, if the game plan was to blitz James Harden, swarm Zubac, let them shoot threes, they made 54% of them. But it was just this avalanche in the third quarter from the Clippers that makes these numbers look a lot prettier, in my opinion. And that's kind of how we got here. And you look at the first half numbers. In the first half, the Clippers shot 43% from the floor and 42% from 3. And in the second half, they came alive. 66% from the floor, 68% from 3. And they still struggled at the free throw line all night. But it was a win that is going to be close on the scoreboard, where it's only a 134-128 win. And the Clippers were within striking distance, had a chance at the end. They were down 3. But a game that the Thunder just felt in control of and felt determined to win. and they leaned on that defense. They leaned on that effort because these were some tough shots that they were making, including that buzzer beater in the third quarter from Norm Powell. So while the shooting numbers are very pretty, the Thunder played pretty well defensively, despite what you might believe from the box score. And then offensively, you just got the J-Dub game. You got the Shea game.
Guys, ever feel like you need a little boost in the bedroom? It's time to stop worrying about your performance and get Hims so you can feel confident knowing you can get hard and stay hard whenever you're in the mood. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis, and the generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Prices vary based on products and subscription plan.
If you don't make as many shots as your opponents, or you can't hit a shot, period, you're probably not going to win a basketball game.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast.
But in reality, this game is very, very simple for the Kings. They could not hit shots, which has been a problem all season long, and the San Antonio Spurs really couldn't miss. Basketball can be a complicated game, right? Especially at the NBA level with sets and matchups, and especially when the Sacramento Kings are trying to deal with a 7'4" alien like Victor Wembanyama, who is sensational tonight for San Antonio. Things get a little complicated when trying to break down this game and get deep into the weeds like these NBA analytic geniuses are. That being said, it doesn't matter what numbers are out there. It doesn't matter the analytics. Doesn't matter the sets. Doesn't matter. All that stuff is just noise. When you come, this is a children's game. If you put the ball in the basket more than your opponent, you're going to win. If you can't, you're going to lose. That's how you sum up tonight's 116-96 loss to the San Antonio Spurs tonight. The Spurs shot 43 of 85. That's 50.6% from the field, and a scorching 22 of 46, 47% from three-point range. Meanwhile, the Sacramento Kings, 39 of 91 from the field. That's 42%. And 10 of 38, 26% from three-point range. This is not a one-time thing, people. This has been all season long. In fact, I haven't checked this before. I checked a lot of numbers. I didn't check this number. If the Sacramento Kings aren't dead last in the NBA in three-point shooting after tonight's game and the last couple of games, really, I don't know how they get there because this team cannot shoot. Let's talk about the defense first. The Kings gave up way too many open three-pointers tonight. But here's the thing. They gave up way too many open three-pointers to the Phoenix Suns last night, too. And it was something that I didn't actually talk about on last night's podcast. Why? Because the Sacramento Kings came back and won that game in overtime thanks to some incredible heroics from DeMar DeRozan and De'Aaron Fox. So in reality, it wasn't really the right time to talk about it. The Phoenix Suns last night, the Suns are one of the best teams in the league at generating wide open threes. And still, I was watching that game going, I know they're good at generating wide open threes, but one, they're missing Kevin Durant, who draws a lot of attention. Two, even a team that's good at generating wide open threes should not be generating as many wide open threes as the Kings were allowing last night. The difference between last night and tonight was the Suns were missing, thank God, and the Spurs weren't missing tonight. You know, I mean, when we're talking wide open jumpers, we're talking like warm-up jumpers, empty gym jumpers. We're talking about when Devin Vassell or Victor Wembanyama go into the practice facility and get shots up and either have one of their coaches rebounding for them or have one of those fancy schmancy rebounding machines. Nobody else in there except for them, all the time in the world, all the space from three-point range, and they just shoot 100 to 200 to 300 a day like clockwork. Those are the looks that the Sacramento Kings are giving every single team every single night. It's no wonder that the Kings are struggling so bad with their three-point defense and have been for seasons. And it's no wonder that so many teams come into these games against the Kings with confidence from three-point range, because they know they're going to get the same looks as they get in a shoot-around, or as they get during a practice session, or as they get during individual shots like you're in your backyard. Those are the looks that the Kings give up way too often. And I love what Katie Christensen, Kings color analyst, said on this broadcast. In the fourth quarter, when the Kings were trying to make a feeble attempt at a comeback, the Spurs hit a couple of just contested tough threes. One of the few times that the Kings played halfway decent perimeter defense. And they made them, right? And Katie goes, oh my goodness, these are contested threes that they're making. It's just that kind of night for the San Antonio Spurs. But instead of stopping there and acting like, oh, this is all on the Spurs and how good they're shooting, it has nothing to do with the Kings defense, Katie goes one step further. And she says, this is a result of the open looks and the confidence that you allowed the San Antonio Spurs to build all the way back in the first quarter. Right? The Spurs were hitting shots and shooting those crazy, difficult fourth quarter threes with confidence and draining them, because all the way back at the beginning of the game, when the shots weren't as important and you had 40 plus minutes to try and win that game, and the Kings played a relatively good first half, by the way. At that time, your three-point defense was non-existent, and the Spurs were getting everything they wanted from three-point range. They built the confidence in the first quarter that paid dividends all four quarters, and especially in the fourth when they put this game away. I thought that was very well said by Katie. The Spurs tonight tied a franchise record, their franchise record of 22 made threes. And this stat from Frankie Cardicelli says it all. Frankie Cardicelli from Sacktown Sports 1140. The Kings have allowed 19 or more threes 3 times already this season. 3 times in 11 games. That's terrible. That's also tied for most in the NBA. 3 times in 11 games, the Kings have given up 19 plus three-pointers. Every team knows that they will get good looks from three against the Sacramento Kings. And here's the problem. Here's the worst part of it. That's not new. What is new is now every team, in addition to knowing they're going to get open looks, every team can come into games against the Sacramento Kings to start this season with confidence that they can give the Kings open looks from three-point range and survive, because the Kings can't hit threes. They can't. They cannot do it. This stat from Will Z from Sports Illustrated, friend of the Locked On Kings podcast. I love Will Z. This stat hurts my stomach when I read it. The Kings have the Kings have scored this season 339 total points from three-point range in 11 games. The Kings have allowed their opponents to score 501 total points from three-point range. In 11 games, that's a negative 163-point difference, or an average of negative 14.7 points per game. The Kings are being outscored by almost 15 points a game from three-point range. How the hell is this team 6-5? How? And again, glass half full, as much as I want to look at this and go, man, if the Kings could just clean this up and start hitting shots, they'll be unstoppable. Because if they have a winning record when their three-point defense and offense is this bad, imagine if it's good. But at this point, what will make it good? What will make the Sacramento Kings hit shots? They can't really generate too many better looks than what they're generating. And I know Mike Brown is all about paint touches and spray threes. Kings didn't do a great job of that tonight. Part of the reason is because you got a 7'4" shot blocker waiting for you at the rim, and the Kings were a little tentative to try and get into the paint. I understand that. And when they did get there, they didn't spray the ball as much. But this season, the Kings have been touching the paint and spraying the wide open threes and bricking them. It doesn't make sense. This Kings team cannot shoot. And I don't want to hear a damn thing tonight about tired legs. I know it's the second night of a back-to-back. I get tired standing up and running to my fridge to get some food and running back to my couch during a commercial break. So I'm not exactly one to talk about the physical exertion of playing 2 48-minute basketball games back-to-back, especially when last night the Kings played an overtime game where their top guys all played 40-plus minutes. That being said, we can't call this game or sum this game up as tired legs when the entire season the Kings haven't been able to shoot. This is not a tired legs issue. This is a straight up shooting issue for this Kings team. They aren't making excuses. The Kings are not making excuses. The coaches, the players, the front office, none of them are making excuses, so I'm not going to either, and neither should you. Fox is playing. I know his hand's taped up. There's definitely something wrong with it, but we can't bring up his hand every freaking night. Whether it's a good performance or a bad performance, it can't be brought up every single night. If he's playing, he should be playing at a high level. That is the expectation for a player of his caliber, regardless of how his hand is feeling. If he could not play at the level that he expects and the Kings expect of him, he would not play. But he's playing. So let's start talking about his performances without mentioning the hand every single time. And I'm talking not just like they talk about on the broadcast. I love Mark. I love Katie. I know they're going to bring that up. I've brought it up a lot here on the Locked On Kings podcast. It's time to stop talking about it unless it becomes more of an issue or De'Aaron Fox starts talking about it, because when Fox has been asked about it, he dismisses it. So we should too. And also this concept of mental fatigue tonight, I ain't hearing that either. Mental fatigue. Again, I don't know what it's like to go through a travel schedule and play in back-to-backs and all the exertions of an 82-game NBA season. I don't know. I'm not a player. I'm not going to pretend to know. But if the Sacramento Kings are as good as they say they are and as good as they say they should be, mental fatigue shouldn't be a factor with this group. Because every other team is playing back-to-back. Do they think the Cleveland Cavaliers haven't been playing back-to-backs against tough teams? The Cleveland Cavaliers are 12-0. For God's sakes, the Golden State Warriors are killing it to start this season. They've had some tough games. They just beat the Oklahoma City Thunder the other night. Mental fatigue, I don't want to hear that as an excuse for the Sacramento Kings, especially when there are so many veterans on this team who have been there, done that before. If mental fatigue is an issue, that means leadership, in my opinion, is an issue with this team. And if that's the case, then no, the Kings are not as good of a team as we think they are.